Welcome to the NeuroDiaries podcast. I'm your host, Jade Rose, writer, speaker, and mental health advocate. This podcast is a safe space where we can amplify our voices together. My mission is to make the world a safer and happier place for neurodivergent children and those struggling with mental health conditions and mental illness. The NeuroDiaries podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. This episode was recorded on Narrego country. This podcast openly discusses mental health issues and may contain content that is distressing for some. Please take care in deciding if this content is right for you today. Breaking stigma through stories. Welcome to the NeuroDiaries podcast. Hello and welcome back to the NeuroDiaries podcast. I'm Jade Rose, writer, speaker, and mental health advocate. Today I've got Polly Wiseman here with me, all the way from London. Polly's a theatre maker and an avid mental health advocate in England as well. Hi, Polly.
Hi. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Polly, so great to have you here today. I'm so excited to get into our talk. I know you do a lot in the theatre space over in London and you're writing a play at the moment. I was hoping that you could share with us a little bit about your creative side and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm a theatre maker, which means I'm an actor and a writer and a director. I will really do whatever anyone will pay me to do in theatre because the wages are terrible. And I run a theatre company called Fire Raisers. And our mission is to present extraordinary theatre in unexpected places, which often means we're not working in theatres, we're working on the beach or in a forest or in a shop window in Selfridges on Oxford Street, London, our main shopping street. So it's finding different ways to sort of transform spaces and make people see the familiar differently. And in terms of making the mental health show that I'm making at the moment, which is called How to Go Crazy for Good, it's transforming the way that hopefully that people see mental illness and particularly psychosis. And it's also meant for non-theatre spaces such as lecture halls and higher education institutes to reach 18 to 25-year-olds because it's about bipolar disorder. The age when the symptoms were most likely to start. So yes, I suppose there's always a mission sounds too grand of a word, but there's always a reason to make the shows that I make beyond just hopefully being entertaining and engaging.
Oh no, mission is a great word. Mission, purpose, it's such an important work that you're doing, and I love the creative way that you're bringing that to people and, you know, in an engaging and fun way as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the aim, because I think psychosis is a scary word that makes people turn off. So the idea with the show I'm making is it's sort of like a PowerPoint presentation that goes wrong and keeps crashing, and the PowerPoint's my brain, and then it uses sort of comedy and movement and Britney Spears and Florence Nightingale, and it's interactive with the audience, so hopefully not in a scary way, but I do speak to the audience and try and make it a relaxed and fun experience rather than a sort of doom and gloom scary tale. I've already written a scary play about mental health. This one's different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is the scary and the dark side to it, but there is also that, you know, that other side to it that is fun and is super engaging and is really light and fast paced and busy. And so it's that's cool that you've got, you know, a work for each polarity.
Yes. I mean, I think that was quite important, is to find a way to express the manic and upside of bipolar in a way that it acknowledges that it can be fun and exciting without obviously glamorizing it and saying that this is a good thing. So that's quite a balancing act, but hopefully I've found a way to do that by using humor, and I've got a load of post-it notes that are exactly what I did when I was manic, really, is to write loads of things down and stick them all over the wall. So I sort of make a joke out of that, but at the same time, hopefully it's showing the audience what it's like to have a manic brain and to have all these physical expressions of that, so that the audience can kind of experiencing that.
Like a physical expression of what that racing mind experience is like. Just thought, idea.
Yeah, no, for sure, because theatre is always show, don't tell. So it's finding ways to externalise what's going on in my brain, rather than me going, oh, well, it was like this, and then, then I started not sleeping and talking very fast. And you don't need that. You can just show that. So that's hopefully what I'm...
Oh, well, best of luck with that. I know it's theatre, so I'll have to physically get over to London to get a chance to see it. If you are in London, make sure to connect with Polly. She's on Instagram as Polly_Wiseman, so you can keep tabs on that and check it out if you're in the area.
I'm hoping to do an online version and to take it to other countries as well. So, but I've got to do a pilot in various places in the UK to sort of proof of concept, and then raise the money to take it online and to other places. So that's the long-term plan. Fingers crossed.
Amazing. Yeah, I forgot we're post-COVID and there's online options for everything now. So online theatre, that could be really cool.
Yeah, give it a go.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's jump into some questions. We've already sort of started a little bit, but I wanted to get a sense of, all mental health things aside to begin with, who you are as a person, because you are so much more than just a diagnosis. You're a full-fledged human being. There's lots going on. So I know you do the theatre side of things. What else like consumes your day to day? Who do you live with? What are your hobbies?
So I live with my lovely husband in a one-bedroom flat in East London, which is quite a nice, vibrant, exciting area. It's quite trendy these days, so there's a lot of things like vintage shops and cafes that only sell 100 different kinds of cereal, and lots of people taking Instagram and TikToks of themselves all over Brick Lane, which is the main road near where we live. So it's a really fun, vibrant area to live in. But yes, all the prices have gone up. There's millions of tourists come in every weekend. So I think ultimately we'll probably try and move back down to Brighton by the sea, which is near to where I am now, and that's where I'm from. I miss the sea. And so my husband works in the NHS, our National Health Service. In fact, half my family do. Get onto that once we get back into the mental health side of things. And yeah, I suppose London is really full of great things to see and do. So the big art galleries and things are really are great to go and have a look at. And obviously there's great nightlife. And my husband and I are quite goth. So we sort of like going to alternative nights and something called the Satanic Flea Market, which... It's not satanic, it's just alternative and gothy. But in fact, the first thing when we met at a party, the first thing that we sort of bonded over was our love for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we rewatch that every so often. We both love cats as well, but we're on the 10th floor of a tower block, so we can't have any cats yet. Oh yes, when I was born it was snowing, and so I was nearly named Snowflake. Can you imagine
that's cute.
How bad that would have been terrible given the connotations these days. And working in the arts and being called Snowflake would just have been terrible.
Oh, you wouldn't have survived.
I think what else? Is there anything else you want to know?
No, that's great. I'm getting a real image of you in some lovely black funky attire, lots of black eyeliner and makeup on, and walking with your husband down the street. Yeah.
Flames and skulls.
I love it. Walking around London, maybe got a gothic umbrella, going to a cafe. No, that's cool. I'm getting an image of you out in the world.
I mean, we're lucky. London is one of those places where you can really wear whatever you want and no one will turn bat an eyelid.
Love that.
Yeah, and
I live in
Brighton. Sorry, go ahead.
I live in a small town in regional New South Wales, and I think if I went down the street like that, I would get quite a few looks.
That's I grew up in a village in Sussex, which is a rural part of England, and I spent my childhood trying to escape this little village to go to London, and part of it was if you wore anything other than welly boots and a fleece, people stared at you like, what's that?
Oh, that's good. You found your people then. You found your place.
Yeah. No, I guess I suppose a lot of us who are a bit alternative or just find a town or a community that fits rather than the one we were necessarily born into. London and Brighton actually here is very, my sort of nearest town here is extremely alternative. They had
I've heard that.
Yeah, the UK's only Green MP for years. Now there's 4 Green MPs here. So everything is very LGBTQ friendly and green issues, and there's a lot of students, so I guess that also helps with the sort of alternative vibe. But you could, I think they've tried to adopt, Austin, Texas has that slogan, keep Austin weird. I think we have something like keep Brighton weird, or keep so it's that alternative-y vibe.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like a fun place to be.
Yeah.
So let's get into the mental health side of things. So do you want to talk us through what condition you experience and how do you describe that in your words?
Right, so my diagnosis is bipolar disorder type 1, and bipolar disorder is a condition of very extreme moods, so from very high to very low, and at its most extreme, the very high level mania can involve a kind of complete loss of judgment and psychosis, like hallucinations and delusions, sort of feelings of grandiosity, like you think you're God or you're meant to save the world. And then the opposite side of that is depression, being very low, and at its lowest that would involve suicidal feelings or attempts. And then you can be sort of anywhere on the mood spectrum. There's a really useful Bipolar UK mood scale which goes from 0 to 10, and it sort of maps out all the gradations from very low to very high. Sorry, what was the rest of the question?
Yeah, no, that was it actually. That was great. And just to follow up from that too, like everyone experiences bipolar symptoms differently. What are the main ones that show up for you in a depressive episode or a manic episode?
I think if I'm going manic, I sleep less and talk faster and take on more projects. And then eventually, and the world all starts to glow in bright colours, and I start to experience grandiosity, like thinking I'm meant to save the world, or on occasion I've been like visited by a vision of the Virgin Mary. I'm an atheist. I don't know where that comes from.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
But it all makes total sense if you're a bit manic and psychotic. And then I suppose on the flip side, it's just everything seems very dark and hopeless. And again, I've had hallucinations where it's sort of the opposite. It's kind of devil's henchman or whatever telling me to kill myself. So, and then obviously there's bits in between, because maybe that's the important thing to say, is that obviously right now I'm not particularly depressed or particularly elevated. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. So it's episodic, which is quite frustrating because you can't always plan very specifically, or you don't always know when you're going to be all right and when you're going to be high or when you're going to be low. I think for me also, because I haven't always been very compliant with medication and things, it's been a case of sort of taking on a new project, it's all going really, really well, and then I go manic, and then I crash, and then I'm back on medication, and sort of like, slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'll think I'm all right again, and I'll probably think I don't need the medication and come off it, and then the whole thing will start all over again.
The cycle. And it's frustrating not knowing when that's going to come back, because you're right. You plan your life like, all right, I'm going to take like a vacation during these, I'm going to have 2 weeks off. I'm going to go to Fiji. I'm going to have a lovely time. And then like a depression strikes and you've fucking saved all year for this holiday. And now it's awful.
Yeah. No, so that's been your experience as well, the sort of unpredictability.
The unpredictability, yeah. And it's just, this is not what I need right at this moment. Just not having a say in when it comes, and, could really come at the worst times.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also to achieve anything you want to achieve in life, it usually involves an element of stress. And unfortunately, stress is one of the things, well, for me anyway, that's most likely to bring on a episode. So there's a sort of cost, potentially, isn't there, to actually achieving what you want to.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because it is like, the more you try to keep a regular life, and if you are ambitious and there's things you want to do, things you want to achieve, the more you push yourself to do them, the more you are opening yourself up to different environments and different like environmental stresses, which, as we know, like environmental stresses are can be a big episode trigger. So it is like a very fine line to walk in, like, how do I do what I want but do it safely?
Yes, I mean, a couple of months ago I had an appointment with a psychiatrist, and he's like, you have to cut right down on all your work. And I'm a bit like, for a start, I'm freelance. It doesn't really work like that, because if you don't earn money, you can't pay your bills, can't eat. And also, that just sounds really sad, that you have to curtail your life to be completely stress-free and completely non-functional, really. It's in the way that you might hate to be and have a rewarding job.
And it sounds boring, right? Like you want to do your fun projects. I know for me, like when I get going on something that I'm really interested in, like that's number one. And my husband might pick things up at time and be like, oh, maybe you're taking on too much. Like maybe you should slow down. And in my mind, I'm like, sure, but really, nope, I'm not letting this go. Like,
no, I'm glad to know you do that too, because to an extent, you have to then, if you stop doing things because of your mental health condition, you're sacrificing a part of your personality, potentially, I think, and your self-esteem, because obviously one of the things that work gives people is self-esteem, isn't it? Is a feeling of accomplishment. And I'm not saying our value resides in our ability to be productive, because that's obviously a horrible ableist trap. But at the same time, I think for a lot of us, if we weren't using our imaginations and our knowledge, we would feel very sad and bored.
Yeah, and bored. And it would almost like potentially trigger a depressive episode, because if you lack that meaning and that purpose, then that also threatens to bring on the other side of the spectrum.
Yes, I think that's the other thing, is it's such a weird balancing act, because you don't want to be so isolated and so not involved in life and work that yes, you just become very depressed through that. And on the other extreme, there's taking on all the work and becoming ill through that. So do you find like you've found a way to
I think it's self-awareness for me, I think, is key. And being adaptable to change. I think just being very self-aware of like, oh, I think I'm just starting to go into like a bit of a hypomanic episode, or oh, my mood's really dropping this week. Being able to catch it really quickly and then follow steps to stop that, I guess. Like, for instance, like if I'm starting to feel a bit hypomanic, I might be really engaged or excited about a project, and that seems to like, that can build quite quickly for me and build to a state of hypomania, and I almost have to I have to stop and remind myself to go and eat lunch, or to, you know, like go and like do the house chores that need doing. Stop and like go for a walk and do the exercise, because sometimes I just don't want to like stop what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But if I don't, then that's going to build and build and heighten. So it's being self-aware and then remembering to try and slow it down and try and take it back. I do a lot of yoga, and yoga is really helpful if I feel like a hypomanic, you know, I feel like that sort of state. Just like I've learned that rather than trying to sort of egg it on, which feels really tempting because you're starting to feel like euphoric and, you know, really excited and all these fast ideas, having the discipline to actually, okay, stop. I know where this path goes, and try intentionally to bring it back and slow it down and go to self-care and do all those like basic, you know, things that are a part of a normal day, like eating and showering and all those normal steps that you take for granted. Like you just don't want to do them anymore because you're just like, you know, you're busy. But just stopping and remembering them and going back to the basics, I found that to be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the yoga. I do, for exercise, I do like a really fast combat class 2 or 3 times a week. And then I make myself also do yoga, some of it slow yoga, because it's a really good way to tell if I'm a bit high or a bit low. Like if I really can't hold the positions for long without sort of fidgeting, then I know I'm a bit high. And if I'm lying there crying my eyes out, I'm like, okay, I might be a bit depressed. It's a good test. And I think exercise in general is really important for regulating your mood. I think I really notice it when I haven't exercised for a while for some reason. So, and it is boringly all about a schedule, isn't it? Like when I'm unwell, my lovely husband makes me a chart that literally says, you know, eat lunch, go for a walk, do the washing up, only do one work thing today. And he sort of reminds me to check the schedule, and he'll text me saying, remember to eat lunch and all those things, which is amazing. I'm very lucky. Kobe's an amazing man. But it does sort of, I guess, those are the really boring things that can keep you attached to the earth rather than flying off into the...
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And during a depressive episode too, I found that list idea really useful. During my like university days was probably my lowest time. I had a prolonged period of about 18 months where I was just really low. And I think part of it was that like I didn't find university that stimulating. Like I sort of need to be a bit busier. Like I could be, but then you're limited in what work you can do while, you know, you do have to go to tutorials at 10 and 2 o'clock, and it's like, how do you fit a job around that? I had to stop working like night shifts. Previously I did hospitality, but that was also really affecting my mental health, so I had to try and limit to like daytime hours. But I found writing because you have long days where you're meant to be studying, but you know it just drags on. So I used to write myself a list. Okay, one like physical health thing, one thing for like mental well-being, one like intellectual challenging thing, one thing to connect with like friends or family. And I'd have a little like a category, and it was like do one thing in each day, and that would sort of help me not like didn't really help me get to a good place, but it helped me get through the days, I guess.
That's a really great idea. That I might steal that. Just one
nice.
from each,
You're welcome.
each category. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps you like holistically like inching forwards, I guess.
Yeah, and not getting fixated on doing all your work things in one afternoon and all your exercise in one day or whatever. It's making you
making you a bit of everything. Yeah. Nice. Well, so you've got bipolar diagnosis. How do you cope with that publicly? Are you know, when you're out and about, when you're in theatre, like if you have an episode come on, how do you deal with that?
It's been a bit of a long twisted history, because I was diagnosed when I was 19 and I was at drama school, and so essentially they thought I had cyclothymia. They gave me antidepressants. It sent me very manic and psychotic. I got sectioned, which means you're involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward. And then from there, I got the bipolar 1 diagnosis. I went back to drama school eventually, and they warned me never to tell anyone or I wouldn't get any work. So then there was this big thing of sort of shame. I did set up my own theatre company, possibly in a slightly manic state, whilst I was at drama school. So at least I could make my own work, and I didn't have to rely on completely following the pace of the industry, which is very all or nothing. Running a theatre company brings its own stresses. So I think I just shut up about being bipolar for years, only it didn't really stay in the box, because obviously I kept having episodes. I was hospitalised some more times. So then obviously people know there's something going on. So I think I must have told people I trusted that or people I was working with, because I had to explain what was going on. But when I didn't, because mostly I didn't, because I'd been given this warning, I think people probably just thought I was flaky and not very reliable, which is worse, really, isn't it? Because that's not going to get you more work, really. And so then, I suppose through my 30s, and I got married, and I thought, oh, happily ever after, I'm cured, it's all fine. So I did tell my husband, but I think I made it sound like a thing that happened in the past. And the thing I've always retreated to is that I don't have a mental illness. It was the terrible experiences on psych wards that made me mentally ill. Sometime in my 20s, after I got out of one of the psych ward admissions, I wrote a play about my experiences, and they were really awful, and it was really horrible to watch. And then I had all the people come up to me in the bar afterwards and tell me their terrible experiences. And so again, that was quite re-traumatizing. So that probably is another reason why in my 30s I decided I would just not have bipolar.
Just decide, nope, not having that.
No, completely. Because I don't think anyone really wants to have bipolar. So, and then, the other day I read some diaries from my 30s, and it's a train wreck. It is the same pattern again, is getting really involved in something, it going really well, going manic, losing the plot, run to the doctor going, my head's going to explode, help me, being given medication again, and then eventually deciding I don't need this anymore. And then the whole thing starting again. So now I'm in my 40s and living with my husband, and then the COVID lockdowns happened. And so I found those very triggering, because the words they used in Britain were like, we're just keeping you safe, which is exactly what they said to me when they were dragging me off to a really unsafe psychiatric hospital. So this whole thing of being not allowed to leave your flat and seeing all the stuff about we're keeping you safe. And my husband works in the health service, and they were sending him into work. So there was the added stress of is he going to die? And 2 of his colleagues died. And so I think there was that as well. So I think I just started to sort of become more unstable. Then after COVID, all the work came back that had been halted. Obviously, live theatre, everything was on hold through those lockdowns. Suddenly, all the jobs that I'd had before kind of came back on stream. So I was doing deadline after deadline after deadline, and which eventually just sent me manic. So then I had to sort of, and I'd posted, so I was a bit manic, and the world was a really beautiful place, and it was glowing, and everyone was lovely and connected to me, and I was meant to save the world. So I wanted everyone to know about it. So I put that all over social media. And then, then when I was finally sort of medicated back down to earth, I looked at all this stuff and I was a bit ashamed and embarrassed. But I'd had all these really lovely messages from other people who were going through the same thing. And so I decided not to delete the post, but to keep trying to build a community, to find other members of the community, which wasn't an option when I was diagnosed back in the late 90s. So, and also I decided to use the experience to raise money for Bipolar UK, which is the UK's only bipolar charity. I was also working at the time on a show. We were doing a workshop at the National Theatre Studio, and I was quite manic, and that was really tricky because I literally had to say, this is what's happening, this is why I'm like this is what I need.
Yeah.
And that's made me now go, no, I need an access document, I need a little prepared spiel I do about this is the condition, this is what might happen, this is how it's manageable. So that you and I think that's probably quite important for most people to have for work, I would think.
That's a great idea. I don't think it's done enough in workplaces, but imagine if we did, like that would just make you feel really safe, I think, at work and understood. Like I know for me, if I have to go into the office, I'm lucky that I work remote most of the time, but I go into the office sometimes, and if I'm like a bit hypomanic, like I'm probably not adhering to the social codes very much because I just feel like super comfortable with everyone, and I'm like, why wouldn't we discuss, whatever topic, like nothing's too personal, like yada yada yada, lots of energy. I think that maybe and I'd like this with my husband as well, and I just need like a gentle reminder from him sometimes, like, hey, like tone it down, remember, it'd be good to have someone sort of in a work environment just be able to tap you in the shoulder and be like, hey, like just take a deep breath.
Yeah, no, I'm working with a lovely producer at the moment who's very she's used to working with people with mental health issues, but she's really done the research and asked me about the bipolar symptoms, and so she's quite aware now, and she's also realised that other people she works with quite possibly have bipolar because they'll send her reams of ideas in the middle of the night, and then sometimes they'll just disappear for weeks at a time. And so that's such a sort of amazing thing to have someone who's supportive.
Well, the thing is, like, in your environment as well, you probably are more likely to cross paths with more bipolar people. Like, we know that everyone that I've interviewed and everyone I've been connecting with that has bipolar, everyone has some sort of creative outlet. We're very creative people. So it makes sense that in the theatre world, you would see those patterns coming up, not just from yourself, but from other people as well.
But I think we're still quite bad, even in theatre, which you'd think would be a more inclusive, more kindly profession. I still think there's a lot of stigma and prejudice. And I think that's just because certainly in the UK, we're just not very good at talking about mental illness. There's a big thing about mental health, but by that they mean doing some yoga and taking some time to breathe and maybe a little bit of anxiety and depression. But I think once you get to bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, where you're actually talking about psychosis, say, I think that's when most people draw back instinctively. So that's something that I think the workplace needs to be better at changing that culture.
Yeah, I feel that here too, and it's why I want to have more of these conversations and amplify people's voices because, there's a lot more discourse these days around anxiety, depression, even now, autism, ADHD, neurodivergence, that's a lot more spoken about. It's becoming more accepted, but it feels like bipolar's not there yet. And I think it's because these conditions do have that element of psychosis in the background that just... I think it scares people a little bit, but I think if we talk about it more and people understand it a little bit better, it doesn't have to be so scary, but two, the more awareness that we can get out there is actually going to make the people who experience it be able to get help and get understanding before they get to that point.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, because in Britain, 1 in 50 people has bipolar disorder. I'm sure a lot of them aren't diagnosed. Maybe some of them never get diagnosed. But that's actually a huge amount of the population, and it's still a condition that's really badly understood. So that means exactly what you say, that when people start to experience symptoms, they don't know their symptoms. They don't know that they might have bipolar disorder. So they might end up, like I did, just getting given an antidepressant and becoming manic and psychotic. And that's a horrible experience, to be involuntarily committed to a hospital, and that some of the brutality and unsafeness that goes with that. If you can spare, I mean, that really is what drives me, is I don't want anyone else to experience the things I experienced. And the only way we can do that really is by raising awareness about the condition, making people not afraid to ask questions and to learn about it, and to try and support people better.
Yeah, and there's such like more awareness needs to be had, like in the public, but also within the mental health or within the healthcare system. Because I hear so many people, and that was my experience as well, is I first went to the doctor because I was having insomnia and I was like, I just could not sleep. And he sort of said, oh, I think you're anxious. Here's an antidepressant that'll help you sleep. But in some cases for bipolar people, antidepressants can be a trigger that can actually trigger a more extensive depressive episode or a hypomanic or a manic episode. So really, like, they really need to do a bit more due diligence, because there's significant harm that can come from prescribing the wrong medication to someone.
Sure, and there's obviously a gendered component as well, and a racist component, and like all the intersections. If you present to your GP in a female body and say that you're having symptoms, they are quite likely to think that you're anxious, or I'm trying to think what else, maybe depressed, they would say.
Dramatic.
Yes, I think making it up. Attention seeking is another thing that people probably get. And yes, that's worse if you're also a person of colour, or you're LGBTQ plus, or you're from a low socioeconomic background, or I mean there are so many factors where the healthcare system is not fit for purpose, and especially when it comes to mental health, I think. So better training and more funding is what you need, isn't it?
Yeah. I've sort of learnt over the years with the healthcare system, through like my own mental health and also through having children and stuff, you really need to advocate for yourself in any sort of healthcare environment, which is sort of not what you think going in. You think, oh, I present with my problem, they help me, I don't really know what I'm experiencing, they've got all the answers. And it's so not the case. Like, you kind of need to figure it out yourself and then go in and tell them, and sometimes tell them that they're wrong and you're right, and like you have to put a case together for why you are the way that you are. I think like when I finally got my bipolar diagnosis, I got it because I went in on a good day where I could actually really articulate what I was feeling and why this was like not my norm and why it was confusing to me. But because of the way that I was able to articulate it on that day, she was able to go, okay, like, maybe it's obviously sparked that for her. Whereas on other days where I've gone in really depressed and really clouded and not able to communicate it properly, they've just, we haven't been able to pick it up. So it really takes a lot of that, a personal responsibility in learning about it, and then like, really having to advocate for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I articulated it the other day is it's a real irony that you have to be mentally well enough to advocate for yourself and convince them you're mentally ill enough to deserve help. So at the very point when you're least able, you have to be able to advocate really hard to get the help you need. And obviously, when you're in that state, you can't.
Yeah. So I think I saw you do a post about that. I was like, yes, so true. Like, good for calling that out.
So then it's I think, so last time what I did is I took my sister along with me, because I knew there were things that I wouldn't be able to talk about. And so she is a consultant clinical psychologist working in the NHS. So she has a professional background in it anyway. But I would say that even if you're not lucky enough to have someone who's a mental health care professional, just taking someone else along who you felt comfortable enough to tell what's actually going on, and so that they can then articulate what you can't necessarily in the moment. Because these days I'm incredibly anxious about going into healthcare settings because of trauma from past experiences, which then means I kind of shake and go mute and I can't explain at all what's going on. So just having another person there to advocate for you, I think, can be really important if you have access to someone.
Yeah, definitely. I've on the other side, like I've been that person for my husband going into things because he has bad post-traumatic stress disorder, and he would go in to get help, but he couldn't talk about it, so therefore he couldn't get the help. So just going in with him and being able to hold his hand or interject and say, oh, remember you do this, remember you do that, was enough for him to be able to eventually get the right diagnosis.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're able to help him. Does he have that thing where I literally go mute?
Yeah, he does.
Sort of
but also, like, he doesn't remember. Like, that's a part of it, is that like he'll have big gaps, big holes in his memory and not remember what he's done or like what he's struggling with. He's sort of, your mind just blocks it out.
Yeah, no, I do know. I'm really sorry he goes through that because it's horrible. But no, I'm glad you're able to get him some hopefully useful help.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I think he said he'll come on one day and tell his story as well, so that will be cool. Oh. All right, so I wanted to go into the early symptoms side of things. So you said earlier that you were diagnosed when you were 19 years old. What did that part of your life look like leading up to that? Like, what were the early signs that came up for you? And if I was a young person today, like, what should I be on the lookout for?
Sure. So I think the symptoms started probably when I was 14 or 15. And looking back, I became majorly depressed. I was quite a chunky child. And I suddenly lost 3 stone in a matter of months, and that was because I really couldn't face eating. I remember looking at a fork of spaghetti and going, I just can't put that in my mouth. And I've never had an eating disorder, so it was just literally I lost my appetite completely. I would come home from school and just sleep. I would go to bed and just sleep and sleep and sleep, and then I'd be called for supper, which I couldn't eat, and then I'd go back to bed and just sleep and sleep and sleep. And the world became very dark, and I found it hard to shower and to do the normal sort of self-care stuff, basic stuff, I guess. And then after that, I suppose it was sort of after GCSEs, the exams we take when we're 16 here, then it sort of flipped. So I then became very, very active, and I was doing I knew I wanted to be in theatre, so I was doing 3 amateur dramatic productions in different places. And because we lived in a village, my poor mum was like ferrying me around in the car to these places, and I was finishing off my exams, and I was organising the Leavers event, and I wrote a play. We didn't have a drama club at school, so I wrote a play and cast it and directed it myself. And so I was really buzzing around the school working on Energy and Haribo sweets, I think was about what I was eating. And then it culminated in a party where I got very drunk and ended up crawling through a ploughed field in the mud. I think I was screaming about demons or something. And my friends found me. My parents had sort of trusted me to have a party in the house on my own. So my little friends found me in this weird, possibly psychotic state. They called an ambulance. And then when it arrived, I punched the paramedic, who then threatened to sue me. I think I then spent a night in hospital, and I think they just thought I was really drunk. So in the morning, they thought, oh, she'd sobered up, so just send them home.
And then, just so much of what you've said sort of can get dismissed when you're a teenager. Like everyone says, oh, teenagers just sleep all day, and not looking after themselves, or they're being lazy, or they're just really drunk. But it's good that you've called that out, because there is an element where it becomes not normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the crucial thing is that wasn't my normal baseline sort of stable state.
Yeah.
So I was a kid who did well at school, who was generally pretty well behaved, certainly didn't go out and punch people. And then all that started to happen. And yes, I'm sure some of it was teenage hormones and ridiculousness, but there was an extremity to it, I think, which was beyond the norm. And then when I went back to school, I remember it was at college by that point. I remember being incredibly anxious, and I suppose having panic attacks. And I think that's quite an early indicator of bipolar from a lot of people, is anxiety as well. I don't know why, but I think that possibly is quite an indicator in young people. And so, yeah, so I suppose life just sort of turned into chaos. I think my mum sent me to a hypnotist to try and deal with the anxiety, because I think they thought it was panic attacks or, which inevitably didn't work. And then, then I went off to drama school, went off to college. And a friend from that time said, "Oh God, I knew something was wrong, and I wish I'd made more of a fuss and got you help." And I was like, "But I didn't even know what was going on, and you were my age." And really, I mean, I can't believe that no one, when I was 14 and suddenly lost 3 stone, I can't believe no one went, "Something's not right." But then there's this horrible cultural message that for women, the thinner the better. So I think just suddenly everyone was like, "Oh, you look really good," which, even though I was feeling like death, do you know what I mean? So I think that would be a thing to look out for as well, is sudden physical changes, like losing a lot of weight or sleeping all the time. I mean, those aren't necessarily normal. So anyway, so sixth form college, all these things continued. I went out and I was doing amateur dramatics in Brighton, which is the big town nearby, and I ended up having an affair with a guy twice my age. He really should have known better, and getting into a lot of stupid situations because I was drinking a lot, but also just obviously not mentally very stable. So I got into lots of risky situations. Then I went off to drama school, set up a company back home. So I was constantly either at drama school, where you do 10 or 12-hour days, getting on a train at the weekend, going back home to do shows there, going straight back into drama school on the Monday, not having properly slept, and just running at a pace, which is when then I must have been depressed, I guess, when the drama school noticed something was up and took me to the doctor and then the psychiatrist, and diagnosed with cyclothymia, given antidepressants, which sent me manic and psychotic, got committed to the hospital. And then it's a long process to get diagnosed, as you know, I'm sure. So I'd already had all these appointments with the doctors and psychiatrists and things. And then obviously once I went manic and psychotic, then the diagnosis changed to bipolar 1. But I don't really remember that process. I remember they checked me for epilepsy, so I had all those suckers on my head. I remember they probably did a CAT scan or something to check there wasn't a brain abnormality, or there was some kind of scan. And lots of questions about stuff that past stuff, like what I've just told you, and family history, and I suppose just if you're in a hospital, then it will be the observations of the staff as well, obviously. But yeah, a lot of that time is, I think mania does this anyway, possibly to protect you, is that memory loss is a really common thing. So there are huge chunks of that time I don't remember at all. And
that
people
is...
say...
Sorry.
People say...
You go.
People say they came to visit me. I don't remember them ever being there. There are things I did that I don't remember doing. It's really scary because you lose chunks of time, don't you? Sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to share how I relate to that as well. Like I feel like I forget my moods. Like I'll be like, I might be in a really dark place or really low, but as soon as I'm out of that, I've like forgotten all about it. Like that has no relation to me anymore. Like I'm a completely different person now. Like that's not relevant. Like it might have been, and you can snap out of them quite suddenly too at times. So that might be like, that was 5 hours ago. Like I'm perfectly fine now. Like, it's because then it'll take my husband a little while to adjust and be like, "Oh, are we still down? Like what's going on?"
I'm so glad you said that, because I thought I was being daft, because if I'm not manic, I can't remember what being manic was like. I mean, I've written stuff down, lots of crazy stuff, and I can't remember writing it, but reading it back, I can get a sense of what it was like. I've made little weird videos on my phone that I find that I don't remember recording, and I go, "Oh, that's what I was like." And then you're right, in myself, I can't remember what it's like to be high or what it's like to be low. which I think is probably why we all stopped taking the medication so much, isn't it? Because it's really easy to feel like that never happened.
Yeah.
There's nothing really wrong.
You're like desensitized to it because you have like the foggy memory of what it was actually like.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think one thing that I always forget, that this time I made a weird little video I found on my phone, which is sort of going, if you think it's fun to be manic and you're tempted to go that, just keep riding it next time. Just remember this bit when, the walls are breathing and there's voices and it's terrifying, and, don't ever let it get there again.
Yeah. That's a good one to remember. Like, yeah, nope, you don't want to go there. Like, it does seem tempting sometimes, but it's like you just have to remember, nope.
That's the weirdest thing about this illness, though, isn't it? Really, is that some of it is that, I think they call it Superman syndrome, don't they? Which is that you do feel more charming and persuasive and stronger and better and more beautiful and all of that. And to some degree you are, because your own sort of inner confidence and energy is actually infectious. And I really remember that that's something I do remember, is other people, and people smiling at me, obviously, because I was smiling at them, and people talking to me that wouldn't random people, strangers that wouldn't normally. And I'm sure that's because I looked inviting and happy. And and just being more persuasive. I set up the show that I'm doing. I applied to do that to a theatre that showcases new work. Well, I was a bit manic, completely forgot about it. Then when I was stable again, I got this kind of narky email going, do you still want to do this thing? And I was like, oh. So obviously even in that state, I'd been persuasive enough to go, yeah, I've got this show about what I'm currently going through, and it'll be fun, it'll be great.
But then off the back of that, you're like, do I still have what it takes to actually do that thing that I said I wanted to do? Yeah, no, it's so weird. And obviously I hadn't planned properly for it. So we'd just come back from Mexico, so I was jet lagged. I didn't have a director. I was in this room that luckily a lovely friend always lets me use, because rehearsal space in London is incredibly expensive. So he really sweetly had given me this rehearsal space. And I was just sat there with all these post-it notes and some music on Spotify, and just literally trying to craft this show without it just being a stream. I really didn't want it to be a stream of conscious monologue, so I was deliberately changing up the way it was done. So I had a lightsaber, and I had Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was using only the music of people who had bipolar. So there was him, there was Nina Simone, there was Britney Spears, and I had a PowerPoint presentation, and it was just mashing all these different elements together, because to me that's the experience of mania, is that everything comes together, and it's in the end it's all too much. So that's what I was kind of conveying with all these props and music and PowerPoint, and I'm this crazy, at the beginning I'm this motivational speaker who's going to tell you all how to save the world, and then of course it all goes wrong. Yeah.
So that was my representation of mania.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It is interesting, like, being a creative. Like, I find that, the hypomania really complements creativity, or maybe the creativity complements the hypomania. But when you are doing something and you're in a bit of a heightened state, like, it just flows and it feels so easy and so great. It's just, world class. It's amazing. But then, I wrote a book this year and it just sort of flew out. But then coming back to write and to work on it in a non-manic state, like in a normal state, like, yeah, you can still do it and everything, but it's a lot harder. It's just, it really takes a lot more, like, discipline and, like, effort would be the key word, I think.
Yeah, no, I always think you write manic and edit stable. I think
that's a good one.
The only word.
Yeah, they say that, don't they?
And I just read an interview about, I think it was either with Halsey's manager, Halsey being an artist that has bipolar, has been quite open about that. And he always said when she was manic, she would just scribble, do lyrics and lyrics and lyrics and lyrics and song making, and then he would know that she would have to go away and kind of come down a bit, and then they could edit the put together the song in a sort of coherent way. That really resonated.
I love how people find ways to work with it or make it work for them. Like I really feel like if you get to know it and are really self-aware and sort of disciplined enough, you almost can sort of use it as a superpower in some ways if you really understand it and are disciplined enough. In saying that, like, I always put the caveat of like sometimes, because really you don't ever have the full control, but it is cool to think that, if you're really crafty with this, you can use it as a tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's how I have a career as a playwright and how I had a career as a journalist as well, is that with the playwriting, I just stayed up for 3 days straight and wrote this play and sent it to the Royal Court, which is a well-known new writing theatre in London. And from that, I got accepted onto their Young Writers programme, and that's how I started my playwriting career. And also with journalism, I was in the back of a van touring a show, had all the energy in the world to spare even after doing this grueling tour. So I just entered this Young Journalist of the Year competition. I wasn't even a journalist at that point, and I won it. So then that enabled me to have a career in journalism. So also I interviewed for Oxford University from getting a day pass from the psych ward, and I got into Oxford University. So you can.
Wait, what?
So you can, but then the thing is, I often wasn't able to like, I had to drop out of Oxford. I'm not still a journalist. I'm still just about a playwright. But that's the sort of heartbreak of it, is that you can't always maintain that pace and that standard that you've set whilst you've got this extra sort of creative energy.
It does. It's just so interesting, like you when you are in that state, because it feels like magic sometimes. Like you are just opening all these doors and things are just flowing to you and everything's aligned and the universe is just like giving all these gifts, and it is an incredible feeling. Like, without glamorizing it, those moments are quite magic, and you just seemingly like everything is aligned for you.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I always feel at the time that I will always feel this way. Now all these secrets have been revealed, I will never go back to ever doubting anything, ever doubting myself. The universe is a lovely, wonderful place, and everything will happen in my favour. And to an extent, obviously it's not quite the case when you come back down to earth, and if you're depressed, it certainly isn't. But I think to an extent, I feel like I've never completely lost that memory of that feeling like, connected to the universe and the good in people, that things can be magical. So I think that would be one of the major upsides of having bipolar, if I had to find one.
Yeah. Well, that's my sort of last question for you. What do you think is the best thing about having this condition, and then also the worst?
I think that the best, certainly this last year or so, has been the community I've found online, because I don't know anyone in real life who's openly living with bipolar disorder. So just actually finding these amazing people online, and we all check in with each other if someone's going through a hard time, and then I get to do an amazing podcast with you and see all the great things you're doing, and seeing all these people who are making bipolar work for them, or at least they're able to work around it so that they can still have a good life. I think that, and that's been a real eye-opener for me in the last couple of years, which I haven't had before. So that's amazing, and I'm really thankful to everyone who's connected with me.
It is great seeing that is possible now, and it's sort of, thanks to social media in a way as well. Like, it's really does help you find that community. I'm only sort of fairly new to that space. I really only started my profile because I wanted to I wanted to get a publisher's attention to get my novel published, but being able to, that's just grown, and now that's its whole thing in itself that I love and I'm super passionate about. And then that's led me to here as well, just finding that community because I don't think I know anyone in real life that has this condition as well. It's just so important to connect with people who actually get it, because unless you experience it, you can't really like fully get what it is. And it's just so nice to connect with other people, and it's like, yep, I get it, I get you.
Yeah, I mean, that's also such a relief. It's like even just talking now, oh yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah. Because otherwise it can be really isolating, I think. And I think probably the worst thing would be partly isolation and partly the stigma that still exists. So the personal side of it being, that you can feel very isolated. It can feel really horrible not to be able to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But what really compounds that is the stigma that the world and other people puts on you, which then can lead to you internalizing that stigma, I think, as well. Whereas really it should just be like mental illness should be like having a physical illness. But bipolar should be seen as like having a heart condition or asthma.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
So that's the goal, I think, is to for me anyway, is to try and challenge stigma and do it in a way that uses humour and engagement and also brings together many voices. So I love things like podcasts where get to meet other people, and between us we can actually spread the message far and wide.
Absolutely.
What's your motivation for doing the work that you do?
I think it's sort of grown and evolved over the past 6 months. My son, he's 4.5, and he's autistic and ADHD, and we always knew since he was a baby that there was something, a little bit different about him. He functioned a little bit differently from what all the other babies were doing, and that grew through toddlerhood and everything as well. It was never an issue. It was just always, it was challenging, but it was never a problem. But in the last 6 months, really, like he started to struggle in preschool, and he started to, socially, emotionally started to really have an impact. And he knows that he's different from the other kids. He says to me, Mum, I wish I wasn't different. And he's having really hard days, and the environment for him is so overstimulating and overwhelming that it's causing him to act out in his behaviours that he just doesn't do at home or when he's supported properly. And that's been a huge part of my motivation, is that because then you look at the statistics behind, suicide rates for autistic people and for bipolar people, and they're just massive. And I just, as a mum, you live with that fear of anything happen to your kid. And I just look at that and I think I have to change these statistics. How do I make the world a more accommodating place so he can experience more happiness and not have shame or have to try and repress parts of who he is and his personality? So that's really there's other motivation, but that's the root cause that's actually making me get up and do something. Is for my.
What an amazing mum he has. He's very lucky.
Thank you.
And I mean that's the goal, really, isn't it? Is that everyone is valid, and if people's brains work differently, then it's up to society to find out a way to include them rather than to other them and make them into a problem.
And so just normalizing it, if there was no shame, if there was no stigma, if it was normalized and everyone could have their behaviors, out in the open, I just think that would take so much emotional pain away, so much pressure away. That is really the goal.
Yes. Yeah, because sometimes the treatment and the stigma can be worse than the actual disease, which is no good. We all deserve support and decent care, and that's that's what I'll continue to fight for. Yeah,
I'm hoping this podcast, helps amplify our voices, start conversations, provide community and camaraderie for the mental health community like you and I, but also that, neurotypical, mentally healthy people can listen to this and get a more realistic picture of what bipolar actually is, of what neurodivergence actually is, and just normalize it, break it down, make it not scary.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the feeling I've got from doing the Instagram posts, is that even people who knew nothing about bipolar disorder actually go, oh, thank you for telling me something about bipolar disorder, because I really didn't know. And in real life as well, I've had the odd friend who's very direct going, I don't really know anything about bipolar. I'm sorry if that makes me ignorant. Would you mind explaining? And I'm like, no, not at all. I'd much rather people asked than it was a weird, shameful secret that no one felt like they could mention.
Yeah, I love that. I love the direct question and bringing it out in the open. It's much better than just like, oh, okay. And then looking you up and down like, oh, okay, they've just, they're reviewing everything they know about me.
Yeah, no, totally. I think I'm quite an open and direct person, and I'd rather other people just directly ask me. And minds are changing. I think that's the only other thing I'd like to say, is that I've been doing some after dinner speaking for the Rotary Club here, which is Bipolar UK's fundraising partner. And not to be disparaging, but these are all people of a certain age, mostly older white men, and the sort of people that I think in my own mind I would think would not be very receptive to talk of mental illness.
Yeah.
And when I've stood up and told my story, without fail, each time they're really listening, they're really upset for me, and at the end they stick around, even after the formal question and answer, they stick around to say things like, oh, I think my friend might have had bipolar, and I'm sorry to say we just sort of stopped seeing them, and now I wish that we'd tried to talk to them and understand. And so I think those sort of people probably even 10 or so years ago might not have felt that mental illness was something you should talk about. So I think there has been a shift.
Yeah.
But it's just...
That's so nice. And it shows that like there's appetite to learn more, there's willingness to be open. No, I definitely think we are moving in the right direction, and hopefully hopefully some of our efforts will help us get there as well. Yeah. No, that's no, I'm sure we will. And I just want things to be better for teenagers now than they were for me. So yeah,
that
absolutely.
It's good to know attitudes are slowly changing.
Yeah. Well, Polly, it's been so amazing chatting to you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. And, it's such a, one of bravery and so much, ups and downs. I think people could really relate to that, and hopefully that can help people if they are, sort of help them self-identify things that are happening in themselves as well. But, it is a brave thing to come on and put this out there. So I really want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you for talking to me. It's been a delight. It's been really lovely, and I'm massively impressed by all the things you're doing to normalise neurodivergency in all its forms.
Thank you. That's so nice. Enjoying the Neuro Diaries? Every interaction helps break the stigma, so be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favourite podcast listening app. Visit our Instagram at the Neuro Diaries Podcast and join our Facebook group to continue the conversation. Through sharing and connection, we can foster understanding, empathy, and support for all.